Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
And thank you everyone for being here. I'm always humbled. One of the first ways I always approach practice is like, how could I be humble in this moment? Because that, I think, connects to the reality of like not knowing from moment to moment what will happen. In Zen Buddhism, they call it don't know mind. So I'm going to practice don't know mind with this brain fog that I'm experiencing. I would be there in person. I'm in Oakland right now, but I came down with COVID. I'm on like day 5 or 6. And thankfully I seem to be getting through it. And I wasn't sure I would be here and even on Zoom, but I connected with Jeff yesterday and we were talking about, so Jeff is here and the board president, for Gay Buddhist Fellowship. And we've known each other for years, and I called, these days it's like an email or a text or maybe like too much anxiety to make a phone call. And I thought, okay, Jeff and I are close enough, and I think speak for all of us, we're all in that generation where we still remember how to pick up a phone. And even though it might be a very heavy phone in a sense of how much it takes to reach out and connect, but I thought it was really important in terms of just this isolation that I've committed to, because obviously I don't want to get anyone else sick, but also the isolation that is endemic because of COVID, and then the isolation that's structural. And so Jeff and I, as we connected yesterday, talked about loneliness and how that might be a good topic to bring in today. And so we'll see where this goes. I'm already, as I slow down and look at, even though I usually, when I teach on Zoom, I'll ask people, just turn on your camera a little bit, and then just so I can see folks, and I can see folks in the room as well. And that just helps me feel more connected. Just taking care of yourself, I feel the incremental sort of like, oh yeah, I'm not alone. And because that aloneness or that loneliness is, it's the worst thing for our mental, physical health is isolation. I mean, I'm speaking with my psychotherapist hat on, and more and more research, if people want to put on their scientist hats, like they're pointing to how it's worse than smoking and other things, that when we don't have that social connection, it's bad for our health. And here's one of the paradoxes of our time, is that being with others in different ways, particularly with this respiratory virus, that it could be causes illness, right? It could be quote unquote bad, for our health. And yet last week I took the risk and I went to a beautiful birthday party for a friend. The birthday girl was turning 75 years old, and I'm still feeling the gratitude. So even in having this COVID virus, that even in that I wanted to hide in the shame of it. Yeah. But I was able to push through and just let people know. And that's where text worked. I thought, you know, I let people know, hey, can we talk, because, yeah. But otherwise, loneliness and isolation is, so that's on the individual level. And I want to talk about like the structural level, because I realize that we live in a culture that, from my estimation, is always selling us like certain things, like, well, if you just did it this way, or if you bought this or that, then you won't suffer and you're doing it wrong. Because so I always like pointing to the structural pieces of like, why are we isolated, like structurally, like how has that come to be? And as I was thinking about that, as you may have heard in my bio, I grew up in LA, and I moved up to the San Francisco Bay Area in the 90s. And I think a lot of us share this experience of, I had the idea that I would escape all the isolation of being a gay kid, all the fear of being cut off from my family. And in actuality, even though I didn't have that story that some of us may have of being kicked out, I was, right, we had to cut all these parts out of ourselves. We had to isolate aspects of ourselves, right, to be able to survive, in our family systems. And then coming to the Bay, I thought, oh, I'll connect, and I'll find home and belonging, and that didn't happen in a lot of ways, in the ways that I thought that I would heal those early disconnections, right? Because when we learned, a lot of us, if not all of us, that we were different, because of, I love the word queer for that. I'm glad we've reclaimed that word. That because we knew we were queer, we were different, that we wouldn't belong. And so when I think of structural pieces, I think, oh yeah, so structural on like societal level, and the homophobia, the anti-trans, homo antagonistic, just those kind of written in the laws and new laws, all those things, right? And so those structural things. And then I think of the structure and how that bleeds into our family structures for most of us, right? And I was thinking of that grief of coming to the Bay, and how that seems to be amplified during Pride Month, yeah? That sense of like still wanting belonging, and a sense of community and gay community or acceptance, and that this time of year kind of kicks that up some. And even through this kind of sickness, the dis-ease that I'm experiencing, and that I wanted to and needed to come here, because there's so many of us here that are facing that grief or that discomfort, those woundings, to still come and connect, right? So that's like the opposite of isolation, is connection. And so that we're all doing that right now is really healing, even though I am predicting I'm going to be very exhausted after this. But in this moment, I'm so inspired by this particular gay Buddhist fellowship, because I still connect to the late aughts, like 2008, 2009, coming to this group and feeling like it was one of the few places, maybe even like the first place I felt connection amongst other gay men, on a spiritual path, that are committed to bringing a lot of ourselves, and so I just want to, so it's a way to give thanks for that in this moment. And then since I've been able, you heard in my bio, I'm a core teacher at East Bay Meditation Center. So we have a thriving queer Tuesday night group that meets, and I've been able to heal that part of me that feels that I don't belong, or even like creating the synapses, to use that kind of neuroscience word, to build the capacity and the worthiness. And the image I have in my head is like kind of the singed kind of connectors that I've been able to sense that I deserve not to belong, that I deserve to belong, that aloneness is a lie. Yeah, that we're never really alone, even though that feeling of aloneness I don't ever see going away. Right? That's it's a part of the human condition, a sense of feeling disconnected, and that I point to another structural piece. One thing I love that keeps me coming back to Buddhism and other ways of tapping into, particularly Buddhism teaches about interdependence and interconnection. So that sense of like that when I connect to my own mind body, that even though structurally I have to work and I'm in my head all the time and doing these things and that emails and all, that I can, through my breath, it can be as simple and profound as that, through honoring whatever pleasant, unpleasant, neutral feelings I'm having, that no one's going to take that sense of connection I have to my whole self, from my tippy toes, the top of my head, and that in moments of having to be disconnected, for the different reasons, that I can still connect to, I have this technology of, on a deep level, of that I'm connected to myself. And through that, through knowing that there isn't anything inside of me that isn't out there, because I've seen enough of myself, even though, there's things we compartmentalize, and that's amazing and necessary, that there isn't anything out there that isn't in here. And that knowing doesn't feel good all the time, but then it also heals that story, the fiction of separateness. Yeah. I think of all the ways, I'll just point out a couple more structural ways, because I'm talking mainly to cisgender men here, where one way for many of us that we've been isolated from a full expression of our emotions, or we're put into leadership positions and hierarchies that like separate us from others, that we're taught like that we're like the prototype for what a good, I don't know, just use the word American is, or and that those are some of the structural pieces that I think it's important to have an intellectual, at least understanding of, like, oh wow, like how did I get put into this position, and how there isn't much choice in that, because we have to make a living and that sort of thing. But then where is there choice? Where can I choose to connect to myself, even though we're in the grind of a day job, or in the grind of like the full-time job of just surviving in our system, right? That, as many of us have seen, a system that can kind of throw us away if we're not making rich people richer. That's my political statement for the day. But this is all political, actually. I want to hold on to pride being started as a riot, and that anytime we're taking care of ourselves, that's a political act. Yeah. Any time that we are saying I'm a whole person and that I deserve to be and I'm lovable because of it, that's very political. And I want to hold on to that, our history, our political history, because even though I'll just speak for myself, I'm weary and tired and don't want to think about the reality that our rights can be taken away by a Catholic Supreme Court, and all these things, that the simple act of connecting, reconnecting, remembering, that's actually very foundational to Buddhism. Some of you know the word sati, S-A-T-I. It's usually translated as mindfulness, but another way to translate that is remembering, that like every moment that we reconnect to ourselves, that we remember that we're not separate, that is quite revolutionary. Yeah. Right. So yeah, and that word revolutionary, and I find myself like wanting to cut out and just like, let's get to like the happy ending of it, but knowing that if we're not approaching it as our whole selves and seeing others as their whole selves, that we'll repeat the same patterns, right? The same disconnections, the same wirings, the same ways we are told that we aren't part of something bigger, right? Yeah, the shortcut for that is when the not being part of something bigger, it's othering, that word othering. It's the illusion that there is something out there that isn't in here. And so I look out my window now, and that humans are so complicated. So looking to the other aspects of the natural world, since we are part of the natural world, it's so essential. And yeah. Yeah, so I'm just going to take a breath and connect to the nature of each of us here. Yeah, this beautiful, divine, fabulous nature that we each embody. Yeah, I really appreciate being able to come together and just to really, I don't know, congratulate us for the bravery. Because when we come and sit, we, particularly together, I think it's so important to come together because some of these structural things are too heavy for any one of us to carry. And when I'll just speak for myself, get into my head so much, I'm pretty smart and I can see the patterns and connect these dots. I'll get into a narcissism and be like, I know it all, and and I have to be the one to figure out how to dismantle these things and the trap and we fall into, to quote Audre Lorde, our Black queer ancestor, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, and really seeing how these master's tools are part of the human condition, and how to set them down and not blame ourselves for when we're being forced to use them, but also how to bring kindness and forgiveness for the times we have used the fictions of separation, or the times we haven't been able to be kind to our own experience, or the times we find ourselves in the patterns of the master, and embodying these things that are, again, aren't separate from us, since I brought in Audre Lorde and the racism of it all, one of the things I hear a lot is like, oh, they're a racist, and so that's another way the dominator culture, oppression, colonizer, all these terms we can use is another way. It's of dividing, conquering us. And so when we put the whole weight of an ism, on to one person, that like punishment, culture that's so endemic in the Western world, or particularly the US, like that punishment is like, oh my God, and so all that I've said is like not an invitation like to punish ourselves for the lifetimes we might spend disconnected from our own experience, right? From the times we disconnect from each other, particularly by blaming other people for quote unquote making me feel this way, or blame others to, as a way to just avoid that accountability, or to avoid the grief of like another person not being held accountable for the harms they're causing. But it's not about punishment, but that's another kind of master's tool that we have to really understand, so that in these times where there's so much change, and very concerning change. There's always the change, anicca, that's the Buddhist word of impermanence, that things are changing, and it's beautiful and dynamic, but even in these particularly tenuous times, can we turn to acceptance as opposed to punishment, and how we do that, how we heal that is seeing that in us, seeing how we've internalized that oppression. So I want to give folks an opportunity to just connect, just for a minute or two, in groups of 3, and to share with each other in what ways do we want to be kinder to ourselves, and I want to say this very seriously, in that, and of all the Buddhist scriptures I've read, and I'm not a scholar, I've read a lot though, it's very rare that in Buddhism there's one thing that'll connect you to awakening, to enlightenment. But the one thing is metta, is the kindness, this unstoppable friendliness. And so if you want a gravity to this question, there it is, and a Buddhist rationale for it. Out of all the scripture, there's all these stories and parables, but it's the one thing that I've heard that leads to direct realization, that's like another translation, is this kindness practice. So the invitation, I'm going to put us into groups of We three, and I can't count the number in the room, so either twos or threes, and then the invitation is to practice mindful listening, so that you're not planning what you're going to say, but like really taking in what the other person is wishing for. Like the ways they're already practicing kindness, and then the ways they hope to. And then usually what we do is like we say something sarcastic or snarky, if I were, and so just notice that and just try to soften around that. And the reason we come together in Sangha is that we amplify these wholesome qualities. Right? Metta is one of the four divine abodes, or they're also called immeasurables. Like the more we practice, the more we have of them, and then they connect us to the infinite. Yeah. And so the practice for the people that are listening is just to, not just, it's actually challenging, to listen and take it in too. That's one of the divine abodes. So there's metta, compassion, mudita. So there's a joy in listening to someone connect to their kindness, and then equanimity, right? So just being present. So I believe we have time for that. So that's very exciting. And then we will come back. So self-timing, just 1 minute, and just take your time as we do this. And I am co-host, so I can do the Zoom magic here, I believe. And I'm going to do that. So it's okay to pass if you're in your practice and you just bow and you want to be in silence. That's totally great. And then, so dropping in the prompt is like where I'm adding to this, but there's no right or wrong. Where is it the easiest to practice kindness for yourself? Yeah. Or where do you want to practice kindness? Or where do you practice kindness today? And so we'll do that. And I think I'm going to be able to do this. Okay, so it's going to be dyads in the Zoom room, and I'm going to open the rooms, and then just find another person or two to connect with, and see you in about 3 minutes. And I'll invite the bell to bring us back. And then the breakout rooms are going to just be zoomed back when I do that. Okay, see you in a bit. Great. So in the room, if you haven't moved on to your next person, just transitioning slowly as you're ready. And if you want to like bow to each other and just as you, and then you might take a second before the next person starts. If all of us, we might take a second now just to breathe and connecting to whatever feelings are coming up. And then you'll continue. Okay. So if you haven't, I know some of you are in groups of three, so hopefully you're all in groups of three. I'm talking to people in person, and we'll have one more minute, and then we'll come back. I'll invite the bell when we're ready to come back. Hey, John, did I mess up on the rooms or?
Oh, I had my computer went wacky, so I had to
Oh,
log out, log back in.
okay. Should I? What do you remember who you were with?
No, it was even before that. You started freezing and then
Oh,
garble, and then I had to log out. And strange
okay.
things were popping up. It's okay.
Okay. Well, do you want to share with me, like, where do you find it easy to be kind to yourself?
Um, I think part of it is when it's harder for me, it's easier for me to be kind to others.
Mm-hmm.
Like for instance,
Mm-hmm.
I'm helping a friend go through a treatment for ovarian cancer. And when I'm with her and supporting her and I'm her kind of chauffeur to her appointments, I feel like, wow, I'm really in the right place and everything is in harmony. And then when it comes to, it's kind of like my kindness to myself is intermittent. It's like I forget. And
Mm-hmm.
if I forget, then those automatic pathways you were talking about kind of start firing and I feel like I don't belong. But there's a part of me that knows now that that's not real. It's not true. I do belong no matter what. And
Mm-hmm.
if I feel like I'm connected, then I can be kind to myself.
Mm,
But I feel like I'm
right.
seen. I can see myself or see someone else and be with someone else and see them. Then I feel like it's possible for me to be kind to myself.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Thanks, John. Yeah, that's if it doesn't come up in the big group, it's something I didn't mention in the talk about, like when we're taking care of other people, like how to know our limits and how we don't know our limits until we cross them somehow, or the yeah, or the structural pieces of like who else is gonna take care of your friend or us, like
Hmm.
and yeah, but yeah, that's great, John. Yeah, that's great to notice. Yeah, the judgment toward
You
toward
know,
others.
on
Yeah.
a structural level, I feel I can get very hopeless about like the social cultural barriers that have such a long history and seem so impenetrable, especially on
Yeah,
race.
right. Yeah, so that's another point that I'll bring up. Yeah, definitely. Yes. Okay. Thank you, John. Yeah, let me bring the other folks in back from their rooms, and then people. I see your attention in the hall there. So yeah. So if you're not finished, just bowing, and we'll come back to the big circle, and I'm going to um, end the breakout rooms and bring everyone back. Um, and yeah, and it's so so we're just coming back, and even so in person, and this will happen in the breakout rooms. I hope there's so much more color in our skin after connecting. It's just really healing. Yeah. Um, so I did close out the other breakout room, so they'll come when they come. But yeah, so I would love. Yeah, we have like 10 minutes for Q&A. Yeah, Grisha, this for um. Let me
Oh,
just
sorry.
put.
Yes, 10 minutes. I'm
All right.
unmuted.
So
Here come the other folks.
all right. So yeah, it's welcoming everyone back, and so we have 9 minutes to just share what came up for you. And yeah, if anyone wanted to share any insights um, or have any questions. Yeah, so I saw Jeff's hand, but I hear someone unmuted in here too. I thought, but yeah, was that your hand, Jeff? And
It was, but if somebody wants to talk online, let's hear from them.
okay, um, yeah, did I was my okay, Michael? Did you want to say something, or John? Okay, okay, Tom. Yes.
There we go. Hey, Melvin, thank you for a great talk. I really liked what you said early on in the talk about Buddhist teachings on interconnectedness help us see that, isolation is a fiction. And I'm wondering if there are specific practices that you can think of, you know, that we can use to help us get out of a sense of isolation or realize interconnectedness.
Mm, yeah, Tom. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Jeff and I were talking about this. In one word, it's service. Um, this wonderful article I read during my yoga teacher training about fixing, helping, and serving, like the difference between those. Fixing is something's broken, I got to fix it, fine. Helping is like, oh, you can't do it yourself, I got to do it. Yeah. And then service is who's serving who, right? That's the interconnection. And this pointing to the structural, and John and I were talking earlier about being caregivers, and how many of us are caregivers in here. I know, yeah, some of us are very directly involved in caregiving, and then taking care of ourselves is caregiving, and then being kind in the world is a caregiver role. And so that sense of service of every moment is that when we commit to ethics and purpose and meaning, that those are and values, yeah, those are that's service, yeah, that there isn't any separation. So I have the gift of being able to be a caregiver for my mom. That's and it brings up all this stuff, yeah. And so the double edge in that is like, where are my limits? Because there's enough in Buddhist cosmology. There's a story of the Bodhisattva and different manifestations of someone who comes back again and again to be of service. And some of you have seen statues of Avalokitesvara is the name of the deity that has 1,000 hands with like 1,000 eyes in each hand, and that's how much we need to be able to touch and witness all the suffering in the world. Yeah, and so Tom, the answer to that is like, it's so personal, like how to touch into that interconnection, and that intention is where it's at. If you're inclining your practice, your mind, body, heart to that, is already like, whoa, that's already more than most people do, you know. And then we sprinkle it with this, like, with the kindness, yeah. And the thing is, once we're already inclining in that direction, these things already arise. If we're already coming with kindness, and then there's compassion to touch the suffering, and then the compassion to be like, oh, that's too much, you know. And then there's the joy and gratitude of like, I'm alive, I can breathe, and you know, and the equanimity of like, it's not personal, and I'm riding these waves, and then all that comes with those things. So that yeah, so that, Tom, I think it could be pretty fun to play with, like that question of like how yeah, and definitely this play. You know, I alluded in the talk to some of those childhood woundings, and the big wound is the art scars, like the ways we've been cut off from our creativity as kids, you know, and that play that's inherent in being creative, and that's creativity is inherent in play, you know. And so yeah, so I invite you to play with that and have that be your practice. That seems, yeah. Yeah. And then the other part is seeing the barriers to it, which doesn't feel good, but seeing the barriers to like the fictions of disconnection, and that can be painful, and it gets to be an embodied experience when we come together like this. And that's the shortcut, if there is one, and it's 100% essential to come together like this. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for that, Tom. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll go into the room, and Jeff, we're gonna. Okay. I can't hear.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I really appreciate the topic of loneliness. I feel like not only do we as gay kids have a heightened sense of separateness, perhaps, I think, well, the gay community is considered, it's an endemic, there's loneliness and feeling of separation. And I asked myself at one point, what is the most painful experience? And it's the feeling of separation. I don't know anything more painful than that. And that for me, the antidote is to reach out, literally, like you did yesterday, pick up the phone and dial a number. And so often, when we feel separate and lonely, we're sort of turning in on ourselves instead of reaching out. And so it's sort of a 180. But I really liked your systemic view. I would call it, or you call it, I guess, structural. That it's really, throughout the culture, and that it's always going to be. There's always some inherent amount of separateness, right? But we are really behind that. We're really one, not just connected, but we're one. I would venture to say one awareness, and hopefully loving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah. And I mean, there's a little pithy thing with the word alone. The etymology actually is all one. So that yeah. And you just reminded me that the reason I think a lot of people are hesitant to reach out is because we're afraid that we won't be able to set a boundary once we are open and vulnerable. As I've been sick this week, it's particularly around illness. And in Buddhism, they're the heavenly messengers. Yeah. And so particularly around illness, people's anxiety gets kicked up, and then it becomes like their stuff, where especially like around death, and then it kicks up people's existential angst and all this stuff, and so that I am getting better at just setting limits, and it's like, no, this is not what I called for, or this is not what I need, or I actually don't have the space right now. And I think particularly with our wounding as gay folks, that it's so life-threatening to not have that community of support, to have a friend is so precious, and so the sense that we'll be abandoned, that wound gets activated, and but what I've found that it's the ways I blame myself, it's like someone reached out and asked me to do something a couple days ago, and I'm like, I just told you I'm sick. And then where I took it personally, where it was like, oh, it's all those times that I wasn't setting the limit. And it's like, no, I get to practice again, saying no, or saying I can't, and that in that conflict, in that tension, either it's something new wanting to happen. And so is it a deepening of the friendship, or is it just very clear, like something new is going to happen on their end? They might think twice. And I've set some really firm boundaries in this last week, and it feels terrible. It activates that I'm going to be alone forever, and that kind of the stuff we've been talking about. And yet someone's going to come at me now with like just more awareness, and if they can, then that's generally not the friend. That's not a friend, right? The whole of the holy life, the Buddha was said to have said, is spiritual friendship. Yeah. And so that I really need people that are committed to wanting to be of service. Yeah. And seeing our interdependence. So just to repeat the point I made, it's like we don't open up because we're afraid that we'll get hurt and that we won't be able to say no. And that's, yeah, period. And so practice with that. It's really counterintuitive in some ways. But yeah. Okay. I realize we're at the time. So I just want a deep bow to all of us for showing up for ourselves, each other. And so we, yeah, we'll keep the conversation going. So thank you for your practice.
All right. Well, we would you like to have a dedication of merit, or would you like us to use our standby?
I'll do it. Because every time I've been here, I've always quoted Joni Mitchell, so I can't leave without doing that. So I'm gonna see what comes up. So as many, if not all,
Give us a second to we get in the circle here. So.
Okay, great.
And we've got the Zoom monitor in the middle, so we're with you all too.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Okay, we're joined up.
Great. So, as we all know, this dedication of merit practice is whenever we come together is a way to honor our interconnection. And so we practice not just for ourselves, but with this deep knowing that as we practice healing, we are changing the structures, the systems. As we heal ourselves, we're healing the world. And period, an exclamation point, and highlight. And so I will end just with this invitation for all of us to be humble as we let the ripples of our love go out. And as Joni Mitchell says, all I really want our love to do is to bring out the best in me and in you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your practice.
Thank you for the Joni Mitchell quote.
All right. I almost forgot. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.